Okay. Let's see if that's an appropriate volume for us to begin. Welcome to my studio, everyone. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we're going to be painting a painting of a polar bear to celebrate Earth Day. So if you didn't know it, today is officially Earth Day. Around the Earth, people are celebrating or honoring or mourning the Earth, depending on your outlook on things. Earth Day is an opportunity for us to sort of maybe reflect on the bounty that Earth provides for us, and without this Earth, obviously, there would be none of us around here. And to maybe think a little bit about some of the small changes that we might be able to make in our daily lives that could make this Earth a better place for those around us and those who will be here long after us. Knock on wood, right? I've got a 20-month-old daughter, and I would love for her to be able to do, at the very least, all the things that I've been able to do. As it stands right now, potentially, polar bears, the subject of today's painting, could be extinct within her lifetime. So we'll take a look at some of this here in a second, but I want to draw your attention to a few things. So let's take a look at the web here. This is our private Facebook group. I encourage you to join the Facebook group, upload your version of today's paintings to the Facebook group, and you can get feedback. Excuse me. I was just chugging some tea right before we got started. You can get feedback from other artists just like yourself who are growing, and there's different people that have been painting along with me. Some of them have been here for since September, which is what, 6 months ago, and some people have just joined us. Maybe you're seeing me for the very first time, in which case hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, do that right now. I always forget, there's 100 or so people that watch the video within the first 24 hours, and about 10 people maybe will hit the like button. So that would really help out if all you got to do, hit the like button. There are other ways that you could support, including a PayPal link down below, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So join the Facebook group. It's a really cool, I'm just blown away by all the incredible work that people are doing, and also how encouraging and supportive that community is. Next, you will see a link to a Dropbox folder, and in that Dropbox folder for Paint the News, you will see a link to, it says at the bottom, polar bears, and you'll see 3 different files, 2 of which are identical. They're just JPEGs or PDF of the tracing of today's painting. So here's the tracing, which you can print out, and we're going to transfer this onto a canvas in a second. And here's the original photograph that we are going to paint today. And I'm going to show you step by step how to do it. It'll probably take us about 2.5 hours to do a really, really good job. We could probably do this painting in 30 minutes for little kids, and it would look fantastic. But I really want to show you how to make a painting like this that you could feel really, really proud of. And your family and friends are going to be blown away by the possibilities of, maybe they want to get into painting as well, just because of how they've seen you progress. Okay, so before I jump right into that, let me show you where I got this picture. So this picture is by Hans-Jurgen Mager, and I found this picture on Unsplash.com. Unsplash.com, they're not sponsoring me or anything. They are now owned by Getty Images, but the whole website is people just like me or you who take photographs and want to share them with the world and allow other people like me to download and use this image for whatever purpose we may want to do it without having to pay a penny, just as long as we acknowledge the artist who did this. Now, I think Hans-Jurgen Mager, I've did as much research as I could find to see if he had another website out externally from Unsplash. And I think he's a doctor. I think he's a doctor in Utrecht in the Netherlands. So I think that's really cool. He's got his day job helping people in his office. And then he goes on trips on his vacations, brings his camera out, takes some pictures, and we are the beneficiaries of it. Let's just take a quick look at some of the other cool images that he's got here. All right, so you can see there are other polar bear images. I spent a couple of hours over the past few days when this is a viewer suggestion. This was an idea that I believe May was the first person to one of our regular viewers and students in the class suggested. And I was like, you know what, let's do it. Perfect, polar bears. And I got some great polar bear stories as well, and a grizzly bear story. Remind me about the grizzly bear story. But anyway, the tons of him, and there's millions and millions of photos by other people. But let's just sort of take a couple seconds before we launch right into our painting of polar bears, just to ground today's Paint the News episode in a little bit of news and facts and all this kind of stuff, right? So here's, and all these links that I'm showing here are all in the video description below. Here, this is the actual page for Earth Day. So if you want, there is actually all sorts of seminars and conferences and talking head videos and ways that you can take action on this website. So I'll leave it for you to look up. Here's a really great article in the New York Times. This is actually where I got the headline for today's episode. Global warming is driving polar bears towards extinction. And in here it says by the year, I think, 2100, in about, was that 79 years, polar bears are expected to be extinct, right? And not only that, there is something about how polar bears can survive for actually quite a long time without food. And so the sad thing is that they may die in about 80 years, like the very, very last one may become extinct will die, and the whole species will be extinct. The sad thing is that for probably about 40 years before that, the species will go into intense starvation and slowly wither away, you know, each individual, because they can actually survive for years without intaking new food. Which would be great for me, because I would love to have that ability, because I could use a little bit of slimming down. My daughter and I are doing our first swimming class on Sunday, and I'm a little afraid I might get mistaken for a polar bear, and the, you know, Humane Society is going to come out and try to drag me away when I get into my swimsuit. Anyway, let's take a look at a few other things. We'll talk about why global warming affects polar bears, among other Arctic animals, in a particularly pernicious way, because of they rely on the Arctic ice, and the less ice there is, then they really live on the ice. They don't spend much time on land. And they do go underwater, but they get on the ice and they float. They sleep and they eat and everything else on these ice floes that flow all over. And when there's no ice, they are a little bit out of luck. So anyway, let's talk about all of this when we get to painting here, because you're probably not tuning in to listen to me talk about this stuff. You want maybe to show you how to paint, and then you can get your info elsewhere. Because I think you should always double check your information. You know, look at a few different places. I mean, there are people who think climate change is a complete myth, and it was invented by, well, I won't even talk, it's just a rabbit's hole. But let's get into the painting. Okay, so here is the printout. I printed this out on a little bit thicker paper. It doesn't matter how thick or thin your paper is. You can print it out on your regular photocopy paper. So I'm also going to use a sheet of, this is carbon paper. And this is a sheet of carbon paper I have used a lot. I think you can see now through the light there. I have used this now probably about 10 times. And it's still working really, really well. So here, if you want to get carbon paper or graphite paper, which are essentially the same thing, there's a link in the video description below. There's also white, yellow, green, purple, orange carbon paper as well. And if you're having a hard time finding it, go to your local fabric store, because people use graphite paper to transfer images onto clothes or to patterns and then cut them out and sew clothes together. Okay, so with today's painting, you could pretty much put it right in the middle of the canvas. You could put it a little bit further down, you could put it a little bit higher up. If you, this is some water at the edge down here. I think probably right about the middle is good. Okay, and then so we'll just tape that down. This is a relatively straightforward image if you just wanted to eyeball it and draw it by hand. Which I love doing. I taught a whole 40 episode drawing course that shows how to draw, and I just saw a really nice comment from someone who just started the course just right before we went live. There's a link to that in the video description below as well. So in that drawing course, I show from absolute scratch, like assuming you know nothing, like it's the first time you've ever held a pencil kind of thing, how to draw, and then slowly we go more and more complex to the point where the end you're learning how to draw faces and people and animals. You've learned perspective and trees and landscapes and shapes and all sorts of different kinds of things. How to draw things that look like what you see, drawing representationally. Okay, so I'm not gonna draw every single little detail here. I'm just gonna kind of trace the outlines of things, because we're gonna paint over all of this, and so even these areas right here around the face and eyes. Oh, I just realized when I was drawing this image earlier, was it late last night, I did a version where the bear looked really, really angry, and I was going to, and I thought about using that. It seemed like, oh, maybe this is an angry polar bear upset at humans for destroying its habitat, and I decided against it. But, you know, it would be very easy for you to change the expression of your polar bear once you've got, you know, the basics on here. You could change the expression halfway through the painting. If you're really happy with the way the painting's turning out, you could give him a big smiley face. If you are very upset with the painting or something else in your life, then you could give him a big frown, and that would work just as well. Okay, so let's just, you know, all these details down here don't have to be particularly precise. Okay, you can see again, like I'm not going to bother doing all of these lines because they're relatively simple painting, so you should be able to figure most of it out. Okay, so you see here's my image. I just want to, before I peel the printout away, I just want to make sure, you know, I'm not missing an eye or a foot or anything else. I do think this carbon paper is probably on its last leg here. I'm going to keep it just because sometimes because I'm a pack rat, basically. But, you know, there are times where, like, sometimes I'm using the paint and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to go buy more after today's class. Might as well throw this tube of paint. It's only got a little bit left. And then I forget about it, and then the class begins. Like, oh, thank goodness I didn't throw that paint out, because I'm going to need it right now. Okay. So, another quick thing that I'm going to do, because this kind of thing drives me nuts. So this horizon line, I just want to try to get it relatively straight. And I did my best when I was putting this picture onto the canvas to make it line up, but I kind of want to make sure that it's about as straight as possible. Because crooked horizon lines drive me up the wall. So, yeah, that looks like we're actually pretty much bang on. I'm just going to draw this line there again. Now I can modify it and change it, and we're going to paint over all of these lines, but again, it's stuff like that. Like, for instance, my Salvador Dali painting, The Persistence of Time, the version that I did, the horizon is just slightly crooked. And we have it in our living room next to the television, and every night I'm sitting there looking at it going like, oh, man. Yeah. You know, and my philosophy on that is you either make it as close to perfect as possible, or deliberately put it on an angle, or what you may have heard of a Dutch angle. And a Dutch angle is, you know, you take a painting or you take a photograph and things are deliberately askew, and therefore it's so askew that the viewer looks at it and goes, oh, well, obviously, clearly that's done purposely. Like, no one would do that by accident, because it's so accidental. You'd have to be in crazy to make that thing happen. Anyway, so let's get started here. All my supplies that I used to make today's painting can fit inside of a shoebox. I think that's really important to know. Here's, speaking of paint that are almost out, these paints are out. I've got a couple of new ones. I finally went and got my suitcase full of art supplies that have been in my office for a year since the whole pandemic hit, and I finally went and got it because it's full of art supplies that have just been sitting in there. Okay, so here's our color wheel. Let me just back this out. So we have 2 yellows. Let me start thinking. We have 2 yellows, 2 blues, and 2 reds. A warm yellow, a cool blue, a warm red, and a cool red. If this is the first time you've ever heard anybody talking about warm or cool colors, I did a whole 45 long episode course on how to paint. You don't have to do the entire thing, although, you know, there's many people who are watching right now who have done it and found it useful. But in the very first couple of episodes, I talk all about warm and cool colors, what they are, how to use them, what the difference is, all that kind of stuff. So I often put white right in the middle, and we're painting a North Pole painting, so we're going to need a little bit of white. Okay. One of as we talk, and you're certainly also welcome to ask me questions. Whether I'm able to answer them while I'm painting is another thing. But I had my own North Pole adventure in 2012. I went up to the North Pole to make a painting, or to make paintings. I am the very first person in the history of the Earth to make a painting at the North Pole. So that'll be on my epitaph. Or so I flew up to, there's a very small Canadian Air Force base near the North Pole at the very tip of Ellesmere Island. There's this little tiny Air Force base called CFS Alert, and it's not there's another place called Alert, an Alert Bay. Not that. Those are much further south, or very far north from wherever most of us are. This is way further north, at the North Pole. In fact, it's actually between the magnetic North Pole and the geographic North Pole. So the magnetic, it's actually north or south, it's however you want to think of it, it's further north than the magnetic North Pole. So actually when you're there, your compass kind of does funny things, because that was one of the coolest experiences that I will ever have. I'm super fortunate to have it. I don't know what to do with these things. I always feel like I want to. There's so many things when it comes to making art. These little pieces of dried paint that I just think like, one day I'm gonna make art out of it. But that's for another. Okay, I forgot to sand this. Usually, so this is a brand new canvas. If you want to get this exact one, this is a 9x12 canvas panel. You can see nice and thin. I used to hate these things. I used to think these are just the most ugly, gross thing. And now that I'm painting so much, I'm painting more than I've ever painted in my life. I love them. I love that I can have hundreds of these things stacked up and they only take up that much room. On the other side of the camera right there is a whole rack of my paintings, and there's maybe 30 of them, and they take up, like, I don't know, like a ton of space. So I find it really refreshing to be able to make a lot of paintings and for them not to take up that much space. So this was a bit of an experiment on my part. I was curious to see how well if I sanded the drawing, and that makes me both happy and also concerned that I'm not sanding too much off the surface, but it is a bit smoother. Okay. It's much easier to paint on a smooth surface, that's for sure. Okay, so how are we gonna make today's painting? So this is our image of the polar bear, and I should also say right off the top, there are many different ways to make a painting. If I haven't mentioned it or said that kind of thing before, I am just going to show you the method that I have learned over the course of my career that seems to work best for me. That I found is pretty straightforward to teach and causes the least amount of confusion for people and gets great results from beginners to professional artists. So I'm sure that there's other people out there who have very different ideas of how to make a painting, but I'm just showing you. I haven't had anyone ever do this who said that, because we can use all the colors that we have here. We can make 99% of all colors. The only colors we can't make are colors that are more intense, that are further on the outside, like fluorescent colors. But those are all synthetic colors anyway. So really those colors are only useful if you're painting, I don't know, 80s retro. Remember that face paint in the 80s? I remember when I used to go skiing as a kid. There was like everything was neon, and I remember like this it was all the rage is face paint, like purple and pink, and you put it on your face. Anyway, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna put down a warm ground on this painting. Now that might seem a little bit counterintuitive because we're painting a cold space, but really this animal, the polar bear that's in the front, we want it to come forward, right? And the way that we get things to come forward as opposed to recede backwards is to use oppositions of warm and cool colors, right? So if we put a warm color in the foreground and we put a cool color in the background, it's going to push the background backwards and push the polar bear in this instance towards us, right? So we're going to paint warm colors on top of here, and we're also going to paint this a warm background as well, but we're going to put cool colors in the background, which is going to push even that warmer color backwards. We're going to paint some warmer colors on which is going to push this even further forward. I don't know if any of that makes sense to anyone or is useful for anyone. Okay. So this is also the only time I ever use water. I mean, in my intro course, we did use water a little bit more often, just because I assumed most people are using the most basic materials possible. So if you don't have any other option, you can use water to help with the painting process. But it's not ideal. So we'll talk about what other materials you can use. So I'm just going to take this and just paint it right over the entire surface. What we're doing right now is what pretty much every single painter over the past, in the Western world anyway, what every single painter in the Western world has been doing for about 400, 500 years, who were painting on panels or canvas. There were people who were painting on white, and those would be your mural painters. So someone like Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel. He's painting on a white wall or white ceiling, and he's applying wet plaster and then painting into the wet white plaster. So he would not have put a colored ground to begin. This is what we call this, but this wash that we're putting down here is a ground. But anyone else that you can think of, from Leonardo to Rembrandt, etc., would have used this exact process. Maybe not this exact color, because this exact color would have been a pretty tricky color to find, but they would have used usually like an earthy red, or an earthy, so kind of look orangey, maybe a little bit more orangey than this. Okay, so I'm going to blast this with just a little bit of hot air just to help speed up the drawing process. Okay, so I was just looking in the chat there as we got started. I see Joshua's here, and May, and Gail, Deborah, and Sue says, I just scoffed my supper down and now I'm ready to paint. Good, good. Well, I hope you, you know, it stays down. Sometimes when I eat a little too fast, things start bubbling up a bit, right? Deborah says, I'm still working on my eagle painting, and I will work on it while I listen to you, Michael. I have a photograph of a polar bear and her cub. Could I add a cub to the painting? It is drawn and ready to paint. Absolutely, right? You could make... The way that I make these tracings, by the way, is I just use my iPad. I have an iPad Pro from a couple of years ago, and I just import the picture into a program called Procreate. Procreate is a great app. It's called like Procreate, right? It's really the standard for drawing on the iPad, and even some other tablets like the Surface Pro, the Microsoft tablet. Works fantastic. It's a game changer with the Apple Pencil. Again, not sponsored or anything. Whoa, I had an earlier iPad that used just a stylus, and I did a whole other project in Dawson City, Yukon, where I made a portrait of every single person in the town on my iPad, and that was a bit of a difficult struggle. Anyway, so I traced the image, and with just a black line, and that's how I get it. So you could theoretically, I mean, I've done this actually years before I was drawing on the iPad. When I taught some classes in person, what I would do is I would just like go to the library, photocopy an image, and then give everybody a photocopy of the image, and then they could just, with a piece of carbon paper, trace that out onto the canvas. And it worked just as well. The only difference is you're kind of working from my version of the picture. And it is sort of just worth kind of, if we kind of just jump back and forth between these images, you can see I've made a few, like, let's say in the face, there's, because it's part of, I wrote my whole graduate thesis on where to draw the line, right? And when you're tracing something, people always think tracing is this really super easy, straightforward thing. But there's a lot of decisions that have to go into a tracing, and I guarantee if every single person, if we had millions of people tracing the same picture, not a single one would be the same. They'd all be different. So anyway, you're just using my kind of standard template, but you're welcome to take the image right here, right off of the Dropbox, and do your own tracing of it and see how it turns out. So absolutely, Deborah, you could add a cub to it. There's lots of great polar bear paintings. I liked this particular image because, this polar bear is waving at us. I don't know if it's a happy wave or a uh-oh, please go away. Like, oh no, don't come here anywhere. Go, right? Or come, right? I imagine it's probably a little bit of both, right? Because unfortunately, sometimes once polar bears start eating food that people give them, they become dependent on that food, and then they start going further and further into towns. Churchill, Manitoba being the most famous of all places to see polar bears in the quote-unquote wild, roaming around the town in northern Manitoba, which is maybe where this photo was taken. I don't know if this is a photo that was taken at a zoo, or maybe in Manitoba, or in the wild. Who knows? I couldn't find that information. Deborah says, Rick thinks that it looks like a polar bear Madonna. You mean like the singer Madonna, or the Mother of Christ, right? Kind of doing some kind of religious kind of thing, right? Which is kind of one of, or I can't remember, what is the sign that, I think it's sort of like that you see in Christian paintings. I think that's what it is. Sue says, I still need to get back to the turtle, and Ace, I think it's Paula, right? Says, hi Michael, please show us your North Pole paintings. We would love to see it. Okay, well, how about I'll do a little bit of painting, and then I'll show a little bit of the paintings I made up north. Okay, I gotta make this painting, Michael. Okay, oops. So some water under here. Mental note. It's wet. Okay. Anyway, so How are we going to paint this painting? What I think we should do is paint, do a quick version of the background and start adding some color into the background, and then we'll paint a quick version of the bear on top, and then we'll go back to the background, we'll finish the background, and then we'll finish the bear in the front. So there's going to be that back and forth, back and forth. So let's get some paint brushes out here. I'll probably do the next set of painting with a brush like that, which you can see is about the size of my thumb, right? Or my thumbnail, maybe. It isn't, I think to myself all the time when I'm doing this, when I'm teaching this, is to like, what style should we use? Should we do a painting that involves blending or no blending? You wouldn't believe how much time I spend thinking and worrying about these things, which I'm sure no one else cares about, but we probably will do a little bit of blending in the background just to kind of soften it up, because you know it looks a little bit like the background looks a little bit out of focus. Okay, so what we want to do now is we're gonna mix a gray that we're gonna put into the background. Now, if you've never mixed a gray before, it's probably, we'll just do a quick, 30-second detour here where we just sort of talk about the color wheel again. We talked about this whole thing on the very first episode of my How to Paint course. The link is in the description down below. And so if you want to paint this color wheel, I show you how to do that and what all of this means. But for all intents and purposes, gray exists within the center of the color wheel. And we get gray by mixing at least 3 colors together, or at least 3 of your so-called primary colors. So we need colors that are opposite, or not entirely opposite. Opposite would be like a red and a green. But if we mix a red and a yellow and a blue together, we're going to get a brown. And then, well, it's possible to get a gray with just those 3. But if we add just one more color to it, it makes it go gray. Anyway, well, let me just show you how this works. And we can mix different kinds of grays. We can mix a warm gray or a cool gray. So because we're going to start with the background, let's start with a cool gray. So we're going to make the background cool so that it moves backwards in space. So let's see, let's use this brush here. So let's start, how about we mix a, I'm trying to think of, should I try to mix a gray that I've never mixed before? What we'll do is we're going to mix the cool yellow and the cool blue. So we're going to make a green. All right, we're going to make a nice bright intense green. This would be the way we make our most intense green. And then we're going to mix it with the cool red. So that's going to take this really nice bright color and then suck it towards the middle, right? And it's going to be kind of brown. And then we're going to add one other color to it to turn it into a gray. So we'll show you how this works in action here. So we'll start out with some blue, cool blue, and cool yellow. All right, so we get this nice green. And I'm just sort of mixing it relatively thoroughly together. All right, nice. So this is a very saturated green, almost like this is a green that really doesn't exist in nature. It might exist as a little highlight on on a unripened banana, for instance, but you wouldn't paint, like if you painted grass this color, it would look really weird. Right, so let's now take some cool red. Let's just put that big scoop to the side and slowly introduce more red into here. All right, nice. So what we have now, so this is, we're basically almost at a gray as it is. Like, you see how it's kind of quite muddy? It's not, you know, a color that it looks like. It looks, what it looks like right now is dead grass, right? Like, it's got a brown, but a brown that is very unsaturated. So, and because it looks a little bit greenish, that means we don't have enough red. So let's put even more red in here. And now you can see, well, now it went much more brown. But I'm going to put a little bit more blue into it, because this is, you know, like a North Pole, or at least we want it to look like a cold climate kind of painting. So this is going to be a gray that's going to have a little bit of a bluish tint to it. So again, actually, let's put maybe a bit more red in here. Okay, that's pretty good. So you might say, like, well, that's kind of gross. What am I going to use this color for? Well, we can take this same color and we can add some white to it. And ta-da! We have got a gray. Now, of course, you can mix a gray just using black and white. But I always think it's really helpful for people to see that you can make billions and billions of different colors from these 6 colors, and white as well, right? So let's just take a look at our background. Now, what do we think about this? Let's add a little bit more white into here. And then we go, oh, well, maybe that's a little bit too dark. Well, let's take a bit more of this color and we'll put it in here. I'm going to take just a bit more blue. And one thing to keep in mind is we're about to paint this color over top of this yellow. And that yellow is going to mix with this color that we painted here. So I'm just going to actually dip a little bit of water on my brush here. Okay, so I like literally probably 3 drops of water in here just to thin it a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to take this color, look at that, beautiful gray, and not even a drip of black in here, just purely mixed by the colors we have on hand. We can use gray, or a black, sorry, elsewhere in this painting if we want, like to do the eyes and nose and all that kind of stuff, but again, we could do this entire painting without any black whatsoever. And I would strongly suggest, even if you do use black, is to try mixing just a little bit of color into that black. Okay, I'm going to just lift this up and then get the sides of the painting. Okay. So again, we may go back and paint some more gray over top of this when it dries, or you may like it like that. But let's just add some more white and let's paint across here. In fact, you know what? While we're here, I'm going to just take this gray and paint little bits here and there. And I'm going to paint this a different color, but let's just really lightly this edge here. Okay. So while all of that is still wet, let's now take the same paint. Let's add a lot more white to it. And I'm just going to paint this. Around here. And before I start painting all the way down here, I'm going to use the exact same color that I have on my brush that I just painted here onto this side, so that if anything happens and I run out of paint, I can just use. I don't have to try to frantically mix this same color a second time. Another thing I want you to see is notice how I'm not too worried about painting over top of the body of the bear here. Right. So this is basically what we call like an underpainting. We're making a painting underneath the main painting. Okay. So I'm just now going to go in here. Let's just grab a little bit more white. Okay. And if this is still, if you're working as quickly as I am, you could take your brush and see if you can kind of just blend any of these. Maybe I should have used a little bit of slow dry medium in there to help. But see how we're like now already building up a little bit of that texture in the background, right? We want to keep it kind of uneven so that it looks a little bit more natural. Let's take a bit more white after, so here. Okay, so this is much closer to actual white. Still got gray in it. I'm still using the same paintbrush. You see how I'm kind of taking the paint that's on my brush and just kind of going a little bit further back up here. And then now I've got a bit of that paint down here on my brush and just coming back down. And let's just sort of blend things in just delicately. Now, depending on how long you want to work on your painting, you could just leave this as your painting. Like sometimes I've started a painting and with the intent of doing an underpainting, and there's times where the underpainting turns out so well that I'm like, you know what? Let's just keep it. I think this actually turned out pretty cool. So that might be the case with your painting. So again, it looks sort of like there's the wind is blowing around here. We're going to paint fur on top of all of this, right? So we want some of the background to be able to kind of show or leak through a little bit of the fur so that it's believable, right? That the fur is there. Okay. That's pretty good for our first layer. Now I think I'm going to put a bit of a warmer, I'm going to add a bit of warm blue to this down here. So I'm going to take this same color, I'm just going to take a bit, see that little bit of warm blue. I'm going to mix that into here. And actually, I'm going to put that warm blue here. Add just a bit more. Right, because this warm blue is going to be closer to the foreground. Add a little bit more. Let's just do a tiny bit of shadow, even though there isn't shadow in this. Oh, I guess the shadow's over here, right? Okay, I didn't see that. And then this down here, let's, I'm going to take some more of this warm blue. And let's get a little bit more yellow in here. This is supposed to be some, like the Arctic Ocean or something. So I'm just going to put this down here. I'm trying to, as best as possible, kind of fill in all of the yellow. And again, I have to get on the sides of the painting. Okay. Now, obviously, what I've got so far doesn't line up exactly with what we see on the left there. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's perfect or not. We just want to get something there that we can then react to. The biggest mistake, I've said this many times before, but it's, you know, I see it so many times, even from pretty experienced painters, is that they obsess over the painting at this stage. And often when I'm teaching in person, there are people that, you know, let's say if I'm trying to do a painting in 2 hours, that stay at this stage for 2 hours. And they're just like, oh, I can't get the background right. I'm like, doesn't matter. You're probably going to paint over it anyway. So you're just wasting your time right now. It's, you know, I need a good analogy for it, but just put something in there, move forward, and then we can fine-tune it later on. Right? Like, what would be an example? It's sort of like, I have to think about this. Sue says, I liked the praying polar bear from the same photographer. And Deborah says, Rick meant the bear with her cub as Madonna. Laugh out loud. Definitely. Again, I'm telling you, I looked for a lot of different images. The reason I guess I chose this one is it just seemed, for me, when I actually first saw this, I thought it was like maybe a faked photo, or, you know, it was a statue somewhere, of which there are lots of photos of polar bear statues and, you know, stuffed creatures for people to go and take photographs of. And if you look at that same photographer on Unsplash, you'll see that this is from a series of photos where the bear moves its hands, and, you know, those bears rise up, you know, probably because they're trying to get people's attention, to get them to throw some food or something, unfortunately. Okay. I'm going to blow dry this just to speed up the process. Deborah says, your polar bear looks happy. Yeah, I think it's, again, it's, if, well, I won't teach a whole drawing class on how to make a creature look happy or sad, but, you know, one of the ways is just by upturning the lips a little bit and putting it down to make it unhappy or sad. And then obviously making, when we come to the eyes, just putting some eyebrows really pointing down is going to make it look kind of angry, and having it a little bit happier would be to make the eyes maybe a little bit more open. Anyway. So, how should we approach this now? Now that we've got basically the picture in place here, the composition, we've got our background ready to go, let's paint the polar bear. So, I also really liked this, the yellow on the belly, orange on there. I thought that was really something unusual about that. And it, you know, it's making itself a bit vulnerable also in this way by being kind of open to us, and I feel like that's how nature is, always kind of vulnerable. So let's see. This color is let's use this. It's cleaned. Why don't we mix a orange here, like the belly, and then we can use that same color in a few different places. So I've got my warm red and my warm yellow. Let's just scoop that together. And so there's too much red. I made the mistake of just mixing all that color in together at the same time. So I need to put a bit more yellow on my palette here. Maybe not quite that much. Okay, so let's take some of this yellow. Okay, so we got that orange right there. Actually works pretty well for the belly. So much so that I was going to do this second, but why don't we just do this right now? Again, I'm using a bit of a bigger brush, and I'm just going to kind of paint a lot of the interior here this color. Now we're going to modify all of this with some white over top of it. We can do some glazing, but okay. Some of you are like, whoa, that's way too orange. Again, we're going to paint white over almost everything in this painting. So having a bit of this orange underneath is going to be nice, because we can decide how much or how little we want to keep in there by virtue of how much we paint out as we go forward. Oh, down the toes here, let's just get... Looks like I had a bit of a glitch happen here. I hope the stream is still going to work. So, if there's any problem, let me know. I mean, it looks like I'm still live right now, but hopefully we don't have any disturbance. Okay. So I'm actually just going to clean, well, yeah, I'm just going to clean these brushes off really quick. Gives the painting an extra little second to dry. As I always say, these brushes which I've used, I'm going to clean them again after today's episode. I always do that so that, because sometimes, you know, when I'm painting, I'm a little distracted. I might not do the best job of cleaning my tools. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm basically going to take this color, this orange that we were just using, and I'm going to make it 95% white. So I'm just going to mix a lot of white into that color, and then we'll see what the results are from here. So let's take a big scoop of white. I'm going to mix it here off to the side. And then let's take a little scoop. Like when I'm talking little, like look how little amount of paint here, because it's always easier to add more paint than it is to, like it's always easier to darken a color than it is to lighten a color. That's pretty good. This might be, I think, is going to be closer to the final. See, there's a little bit of, I didn't do a very good job cleaning this brush. Bit of green still in there, which is not too bad, but I am just gonna use a different brush, a proper clean brush here. Let's get a bit more there. So this has still got that orange quality. If we put it right next to white, it would look kind of like an eggshell color, really. A very light eggshell. So I'm also going to take a little tiny bit of called like slow dry medium. So here's the brand that Liquitex makes. Can you see that? And I'm just going to put a few little drops right on top there. And we're going to use a small brush. I'm going to take that little bit and just mix it in here. Now the more that slow dry medium, the more it's going to make the paint more transparent. So you want to be kind of careful how much you put in there, otherwise you just make your life a little bit frustrating because you're painting that, you have to paint many layers of it. So that's pretty good. Okay, just a quick little test. Now what we want to do is, let's zoom in. Oops. Oh, Steven is watching. Hi, Steven. It's been forever since we've seen you. Great. Steven is my wife's uncle. And an awesome dude. Man, I can't wait till we can come and see you guys again. Okay, so actually where should we start here? Let's kind of go underneath here. I'm just gonna kind of go around. Now the way to do this most effectively is to really take your time And you know, we're sort of just layering these brush strokes, and you know, we can make by putting these brush strokes closer together, we will obliterate or hide a lot of the background. By giving a little bit of space, we'll see a bit more of the background. You know what, just for some of these areas here, I'm just going to take a bit of a bigger brush where it was white. I'm just going to quickly fill this area in here. And start to kind of go over some of the, basically we kind of want to hide most of the yellow in its most intense pure kind of form, right? Okay, oops, let me just show you sort of what I've just done here. All right, so I just kind of went over all of the okay. So again, it appears to be very white, but remember, it's an off-white. You can kind of see, well, it doesn't show up on camera, I guess, very well, but I'm going to mix more of this color. Big scoop of white and a little bit, let's make it a bit more orangey. Okay. So you can see like some of these brush strokes are a little bit wider than others, thicker. That's actually a good thing, right? Because we want there to be lots of variations here. Like, I would love to finish this painting in about 45 minutes, so I'm kind of going at a pretty steady clip here, right? I'm gonna You know, it's just this painting is going to look better the more attention to detail you give it for all of this fur. Okay. You know, I think while I'm right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint a little bit of the face and some of the kind of the darker parts of the figure here. So I'm just going to take my brush. Remember the sort of darker color, this kind of green that we mixed before? I'm going to use this color. I know it's not the exact right color, but I'm just going to take some of this green and I'm going to put it in here where these eyes are. And it works well because we use this exact color for almost the whole painting, right? For all of these grays. So it's already very it harmonizes with the other colors very, very easily, because it's not a new color, it's a color that is already very present in the painting. So let's do that. Okay. Let's do the paw here. I probably should have done this first. I mean, or just for our teaching purposes, because I know some people get lost in the details, just like when we do faces and people find the, you know, get lost with the portrait. Okay. Color, this darker color actually is working really, really well right now. It is a bit too dark for a lot of the painting, but we can mix it in. We can even use some of this darker stuff to mix with our let's see. So let's take this color here. I'm gonna mix it off to the side here. Mix this here, and then let's scoop out. So that's too dark, but so let's mix a bit more of it. More yellow. So this is going to be kind of some of the first darker parts of the animal. So this color, just if we want to mix the whole thing all over again, if I remember, what we did is we began with cool blue, cool yellow, and cool red. We mixed that over here, and then we just added some white to it, and we got a gray, right? Kind of a bluish, cold gray. right? Because these are all three cold colors. And then all I've done is just, I took some warm red, warm yellow, and white and mixed it even further into here. So we've got a brown. And we're just going to use that color in the painting for some of the darker parts here. And we can just kind of mix it in all over the place. Including up here in the face. All right, it's okay if you make a mistake like I just did. Okay, so now I'm just going to take this bit of a darker color and kind of put it into the belly here. Oh, I forgot, let's paint. Okay, so we just keep on going around here. So we will save like white, pure white, for the very, very end of the painting. Okay. We don't want to put this everywhere. We're putting it maybe in 40% of the places, right? Because this is just sort of like the darker part of the fur, kind of where it's the thickest parts as it's going all the way down towards the skin, right? You see how it kind of modifies that bright orange? That orange, some people are like, whoa, that's maybe a little much, Michael. I'm not sure if I agree with... No, oh, okay, yeah, no, I guess I see what he's doing. That makes sense. You know, if I was doing this on a much larger scale, I would make each of these brush strokes a lot more intentional, and I would do them a little bit more carefully. if I really wanted to make the best job humanly possible. Like if I was Robert Bateman, for instance, the artist that we talked about recently, you know, he would have, you know, he would take a lot more time than I am on this as part of the painting, right? And it's okay if the fur is going in slightly different directions as you layer it, and that actually makes sense, right? It's not all gonna move in a nice uniform way. It's kind of a little bit chaotic, and some hairs on the top, you know, are might be really, really long and go in one direction, whereas some of the hairs below are going in a different direction. You might say, well, this looks a little dark right now. Well, this actually, right now, this is lighter than the photograph, but we're also just the first layer or two into this. The more layers you put of fur like this, ultimately the more convincing your painting is going to be. Okay, that's pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to, let's see, I'm going to darken this just a bit, and I'm going to take a bit of warm blue and mix that in here a bit, as opposed to the cool blue, since it is the, you know, closer to us. So I'm going to put a bit of this warm blue into this grayish brown shadow area. Okay, it's the same color, just now with some warm blue in there. And I'm going to kind of do this shadow bit here first. So I'm going to leave a little bit of a halo around here. Right, most of the light is kind of coming from the, kind of almost right from the side, really. It's a little bit odd the way the lighting is on this photo. It's almost like a little bit behind into the side. I'm not quite sure. Okay. And you never have to worry about going too dark or too light, because it all will make sense depending on how much, whatever layers you put on towards the very, very end. And we can also glaze on top to brighten some things up without even adding more kind of fur. We can do very, very subtle glaze. Okay. So I just added a bit of white back into this color to get a bit of a very light gray. Okay, so I'll just show again. I just took a little bit of white and just put it down here and just sucking a bit of that color out, keeping it a little bit lighter. So one thing to think about, if we look at the painting or the photograph here, it's just, I'm not necessarily saying this is what I'm going to do, but if you look at the photograph, look how the right side, look how dark it is, and it's darker than the white in behind. Do you notice that? The white in behind is darker than this. And on the other side here, they are almost the same color. Like if I squint my eyes, the background might be a little bit lighter. So that would be kind of an indication for you when you're painting this. You could do two things. One of which is you could keep the bear as it is right now, or you could lighten up the background to, it's up, or you could just paint whatever you want. So you have a lot of flexibility here. Now I'm taking this gray and I'm just kind of painting it a little bit out towards the edge here. So there might be a bit of conflict between its edge and the background. I'm sort of just in my mind as I'm painting here, just thinking to myself, how do I want to do that? Do I want it to be brighter, or to separate it from there, or not? Good question. I might we're moving at a pretty good clip, which is always makes me anxious, because when things are going really, really well, it means something is about to happen that's going to change everything, right? So now I'm going over top of these edges and softening them up, putting kind of like little hairs kind of coming off. I might keep this side kind of white and actually go much darker on this side. So it won't look exactly like the photograph, but yeah, I think that's what I'll do. So as I build this side, the left side up, I'm going to add more and more white. Not just yet, but we'll really make this quite bright here, and even this paw will make brighter. And then on this side, I'm going to get darker and darker gray. Okay, so maybe let's go darker gray. Or, well, you know, actually, let's just take a second, have a little bit of tea, and think about it. Let's bring the painting up. Or maybe let's just add a bit of gray around these feet here. Right, see how I can just darkening all of this really quickly. I can always change anything I've done, right? That's the awesome thing about painting, is you're never totally screwed, right? There's always a solution, always. And it's just really, at the end of the day, it's just like, how much time do you want to put into it to get it to fix a mistake? Sometimes it's definitely easier to walk away and start over, for sure. It's also, I think, very, very satisfying, just in my own personal experience, to take a painting that is struggling or failing or bad and to try and rescue it. That is like, it's such a cool feeling to take a painting, because it's like, I think it's just actually a great life lesson, right? To not give up, you know, because just because things aren't going your way at the exact moment doesn't mean that all is lost. It's like, well, okay, yeah, sure, painting right now doesn't look like you want it to look like when it's finished, but it doesn't mean it's a bad painting. Okay, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to blow dry this. And then I think I'm going to do some glazing in the background. We'll get the background pretty much done. Well, we will get it done, and then we'll finish the bear on top. And we're probably pretty close in every aspect here. Although every time I say that, I end up screwing myself over. So. Okay, I mean, I like this painting right now. I mean, if I had to, I could get up and leave, and I could feel like, yeah, it's pretty good. Not too bad. So, you know, if you were painting, if I was, you know, 7 to 15 years old, and I made a painting like this, that would be amazing, and I could just stop right now, and I'd be very, very proud. However, just for the sake of you know, for people to kind of learn really how we could make this look like a professional level painting, let's say another 45 minutes tops into this. So I like, you know, the sky, the background, I think kind of works as it is, but I want to just I want to give it a little bit more attention here. So let's get a bit more white on the palette. That one's out. Okay. I'm going to take the same color. So I'm basically remixing that color that I used before. I'm just going to do a quick second layer on top of it. Alright, so all just dried paint that I'm just sort of waking up with a little bit of the white. Let's just see. Pretty much bang on. Okay, so I'm just going to paint this over top. In fact, I'm just going to, remember I said don't use water, but I just got a little bit of water on my brush just to kind of help with this paint, which is mostly dry. I would avoid trying to get like a real sharp edge line here because we want this to kind of fade a little bit. We're going to do a glaze over top of it in a second. It's funny, there's definitely, you know, with the lights that I have in the studio, there's times where it looks great from my point of view, and then I look at the screen and I'm like, huh, what's going on? Or afterwards it dries because I'm looking at it at a slightly different angle than the camera is, right? Okay. I don't want to do too much fidgeting here because I might end up accidentally wiping some paint away. I'm going to take a little bit of white and use a slightly smaller brush now, and not go full dark, but remember how we did some lines earlier? I'm just going to kind of go back and add some of these back here again. Okay, so we had I could use my blending brush just to kind of soften everything I've just done, like, because right now I'm kind of bringing some of that detail back. Go right over those claws. Just going to take a bit of the same color, bring it right down into the foreground. Okay, and we're going to do this kind of same thing. We're going to take some warm blue this time. I'm going to put it there. It's got some more white. Just scrub a bunch of that paint that was there. And now just kind of go over some parts, especially here in the foreground. So it's this slightly warmer color. So I'm putting just a few bits of it in. So this is our foreground right up close. Right? This bear occupies the foreground. The middle ground is sort of the area right here behind, and then this is your background. So I kind of wanted just like little zones basically. And as we get closer, we can have little details like rocks and these kind of things here, right? I'm going to get this shadow in here, so I'm just going to add a little bit more warm blue, more white. I'm going to make this shadow a little bit more dramatic than it was, or that it is in the photograph. Oops, sorry, I can't. Okay, and while I'm here, let's take even more warm blue, mix it in. I could add some like little icebergy floats. Like, let's say this is the water here. Probably be a good idea, but we'll maybe do that when we're a little bit closer to being finished. Now, right next to the bear, I'm going to just go a little bit darker. So I'm going to put some warm blue. I'm going to take a bit of cool red to get a bit of a purple. And I'm going to take a bit of cool blue just to make it go a little bit darker. So now I've got this violet color I'm going to use for shadows in the snow. And I'm just going to put a bit of it right in here. Right, so this is shadows. In fact, let's make a couple of tiny little icebergs. I should probably I'm going to blast this with air first. Okay. So to get a few little iceberg-ish kind of stuff, let's just take some of the colors we've had so far. So some white, not totally pure white. I'll save all that towards the very end. We'll take this and we'll just add like little chunks floating. It's all in the kind of the randomness of this here, right? Right, some parts are going to have lots, so there's going to be some empty areas. That's pretty good. Yeah. Okay. And then actually I'm going to scoop back in here. Remember this little bit of a darker color. It's basically the water. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to go right, leap over it and go right to the darker part. We'll put a little bit of white highlights on there later on. Just gonna give tiny little shadows. Okay, I know I'm taking a few a bit of artistic license here, but as I've said before, you often have to make things, you have to often be a little bit more adventurous or abstract in order to make things look more real. It's like a kind of a paradox, but that's it. That's okay. So actually, I'm just going to add. It's going to add a little bit more of this purple, a little bit further back. So I'm just going to take some of that purple right here. A little bit of white to it. Okay. Maybe while we're here, I'm just going to take some white. Little tiny highlights on some of these little ice floating on the ocean here. Including here in the snow. So I've got like pure white. remember how we sort of were doing some of these lines going across in the darker colors? Now we can do a little bit of this with some white. And as this dries, I might have to do a little bit more. See how now it's looking like there's light kind of catching. Okay. I don't know, I was thinking about glazing on the background, but I'm kind of digging it the way it is, so I don't know. The chat is very quiet right now, which usually either means that everything is stopped and I'm just talking to myself, or everyone's painting away furiously, because there's a bunch of people watching right now, so. Or maybe there's been, the Earth has left the orbit on Earth Day, and I might be the only person still alive here who doesn't know what's going on. Not that I ever know what's going on anyway, but there's a great episode of the Twilight Zone, the old black and white Twilight Zone, where there's this guy who works in a library. I think he's a librarian, or he's like a book lover, and he loves books, but he hates people, and he wears these, he's like, you know, this kind of stereotypical bookish guy, kind of small, with big, like, bottle, thick glass, Coke, Coke bottle, thick glasses, and he just likes reading his books. I think he works in a bank. That's right, he works in a bank, and he during his lunch hour, he goes into the vaults, because it's nice and quiet, and he likes to read his books during lunch hour. And then there's sort of like, I think he's in there, all of a sudden the door slams shut or something, and he's like, what's going on? Or he comes out of the vault anyway, and like everyone's gone. There's like papers all over. Turns out there's been a nuclear war during his lunch break, and he's sort of like wandering around, and then he realizes everyone's gone. All the annoying people on Earth are gone. So he can now spend the rest of his life reading books. He doesn't have to work, doesn't have to talk to annoying people on the bus or wherever. And he's so happy. And then I think he trips and falls and breaks his glasses, and he can't see without his glasses at all. Like, he's basically blind. And like that's, you know, every Twilight Zone episode like that, where he's just like, no! He's now doomed to like die this horrible, painful death all by himself without being able to see anything. Okay, so Heidi says, hi everyone, what a beautiful, majestic animal. It makes me want to do my best to protect the environment. I will have to do it later. I'll have to run errands for my cat now. I hope your cat is okay. I know you've had some problems. Your cat has had some health problems, so that would be a horrifying thing to go through. The sick pet, just like a sick human, is something none of us wants to have to go through. Okay, I'm thinking about going, I may even just add a tiny bit of black right now. I think that's what I'm going to do. Add, and when I say like a little bit, like this is the amount of black I just put on here. Alright, so I'm just going to take a bit of this black. I'm going to use it for a couple of places. Let's zoom in. So I'm just going to do like the paws and the eyes, just a quick little, like you could see, like, boom, wow, that's pretty intense, right? We'll do a little reflection in the eye, just as we do for a person. And for the nose here, I'm just going to actually do the nostrils black. I wonder, are these the claws? Let's going to extend these a bit here. And then down here. Okay. So that's good. Yeah, I think I'm just going to leave the background as it is. I was going to do some really light glazing with some white. Should I do that? No, I think I'm just going to, let's just start wrapping up Michael. Okay, so I'm going to take some white. I'm going to start bringing this to a resolution here. I'm going to start just going to put the white layer on. So this is going to be some of the final brush strokes I'm going to do. So as I do this, I want to take my time. I'm going to get some white on my paintbrush, and you can see how I kind of spin and get a nice kind of sharp So let's zoom in. Let's blow dry that real quick. Just want to try to make sure that the fuzziness of the fur really kind of comes across. So I'm really adding white to this left side of the face where most of the sun is coming from, or where it's hitting the body. And there is reflected light on this side, but I'm just not going to put nearly as much white over there as I will on this left side here. Now remember, it's going to, as it dries, it's going to go a little bit, that white that is right now really bright is going to slowly fade. And then as we come into the interior of the body, just little bits of white with the tip, because we don't want long hairs, because the hairs wouldn't be getting that much white, right? I might darken this side actually with a little bit more as we go. So we'll darken a few things in here afterwards. A bit of fur. come up and so I'll have to wait for some of this to dry on the white on this side. I'm going to let it dry a bit. I'm just going to put a bit of white over some of these darker areas. One thing I like is this snow that appears to be kind of like little bits of snow. So let's see if I can get bits of snow all over his or her paws. I don't know what kind of grizzly bear this is, to be honest, or polar bear, I mean. A little tiny. Some of these are not very tiny little bits, but okay, maybe what should we do just to, well, let's just take a look at this right now. This might be just a good idea just to see where we're at. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of glazing with the purple, or do we even need to do glazing? I've been doing a lot of glazing lately, so maybe let's not glaze. Let's just, I'm going to take a bit of this purple, just like we did down here, and I'm going to use it as in part of the shadows, just a little bit on the fur here. A kind of strategy that is common in painting is to use the opposite color in shadows. So if you're painting a yellow apple, is to put a bit of green in the shadows of the apple, as opposed to just putting black in there. And it really, it works really well. It's Painters have been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years. Proven strategy. So just like I'm doing here, a little bit of this purple as opposed to the orange, right? Okay. So these little areas in here are what also really help give your bear, in this case, like some dimensions. Those little details that are often overlooked by artists. Okay. I'm just going to get a little bit more white on here. Interesting. Each one of these is an adventure for sure. I could definitely go more and more brown in there, and I think it would really, really work well. And really, I mean, I've gone a little bit kind of overboard and pretty intense with this purple, but you know, I don't. I'm kind of digging it. So. Might do just a little bit more white again. Kind of remember I was saying, kind of going back. That white starts to fade a bit. Okay. It's like Thomas Kincaid just says, like, you just sometimes just keep on putting white into those highlights, and it to bring it to life. And I'm sure there's a few people I know who'd be surprised to hear me quoting Thomas Kincaid, but you know, we did a Thomas Kincaid painting at Christmas. It turned out great. I think Thomas Kincaid was a great painter. He knew what he was doing for sure. Let's just take a look. This has definitely gone in a different direction I was expecting. I made a decision at some point here to not do blending, and so we have a little bit more of, I guess you could call it more of an impressionist type of approach to this painting. I think I could be done. Like, I could spend more time shaping the face in here, darkening in some of the stuff around the ears. I don't know. I mean, a good thing to do is to squint your eyes, is to look at the original, and to do that squint, like you're just sort of pretending like you're trying to sleep. And when I do that, I definitely notice underneath the neck. That's, I mean, besides obviously the eyes and the nose and the paw, those are, you know, underneath the neck, underneath this. Let's see, we'll do it like that, right? So this paw is quite dark, and then kind of under here, that's also very dark, and then under here is the darkest, right? A little bit down by the feet. So I think to myself, like, how much of that do I want in my painting? Do I want to darken some of this area in here? Do I want to darken under here? Do I want to darken under there? Let's see them side by side again. You know what? I think I'm done. So let's maybe I'll spend just a couple of minutes here just telling a few North Pole stories. It's April. That's funny. Like, yeah, I don't know. I dig it. I definitely, it's not as, there's not as much contrast as there could be. But as I've said a million times, it doesn't matter what after a certain point, what the original photo looks like. It matters what this looks like. And that's why as the painting is sort of progressing towards the end, I really try to look less and less and less at the original, because it can really become confining and constricting, and I just spend my whole time looking at what isn't here rather than embracing what already is here. And what I have here, I'm pretty happy with. Yeah, I mean, there definitely could be a lot more brown in this painting, brownish oranges than I've done, but I like it. Okay, so which can I show just before we wind down here? Gail says, sorry, I missed a short section, but did I miss a polar bear story? No. Here, oh, I see some other comments. Heidi, or who's it? Paula Ace says, have you thought about opening a Zoom painting class? Once a week would be fun, and we can chat during class, so you won't just be talking by yourself. I have, for sure, absolutely thought of doing a Zoom class. The thing is I teach all day, every day on Zoom at school at the university, at Emily Carr University of Art here in Vancouver, and I spend all day on Zoom. Maybe as summer gets starting, and maybe I'll yearn to be back on Zoom, because my classes for me are done, just finished earlier was it this week? Or no, last week. I've been grading all week. So maybe as we go into the summer, it might be kind of fun to do that in the summer. I'm just quite frankly zoomed out. I've probably I'm sure there's probably some of you also in your jobs spend a lot of time on Zoom, so I'm not particularly unusual, but yeah, that's a great suggestion. I appreciate it. We'll do a bit of that for sure at some point. I do have to kind of think it might have to be a private thing, maybe even through Facebook or something, just because having 50 people or something on a Zoom call on YouTube, because it would be nice to share. Part of what I want to do is I want to make this as open as possible for as many people to learn as possible. So I'm thinking about it. So I appreciate any suggestions on how to make it work, or if you've seen other people online who are doing that kind of thing, especially on YouTube, please let me know. Send me a link, post it on the class group. That would be great. What am I looking for? I'm looking for. Let's look at my. I'm going to take you to my own website. I haven't been there in a couple of years, and see if we can find something there to to talk about here. Okay, so here's my painting at the North Pole project. Let's click on that, because I think there's a lot of the relevant information about my experience already on here. So here's a picture of me painting on Ellesmere Island, at the very tip of the most northern part of all Canada, and I think, is there a map on here somewhere? Here's a documentation of a painting that I was painting. This is a Canadian Environment Canada weather station, which looks, maybe, I don't know how big it looks to you. It's about the size of a garage. Not that big. And then here's my painting. I made this painting outside. It was like minus 40 degrees. And I made that painting in about 20 minutes or so. Painting pretty quickly. You really want to paint fast when you're outside. One of the techniques that I learned so I was part of the Canadian Forces Artist Program, otherwise known as the War Artist Program, and what's cool about the War Artist Program is that, you know, I think 5 members of the group of 7 were part of that group. Alexander Colville, so you have like A.Y. Jackson, Alexander Colville, David Milne, who else? Was Lauren Harris a part of it? I think Lauren Harris was part of it. J.H. McDonald, I think A.J. Canson. No, McDonald wasn't a part of it. I'm sure there's all this information's online somewhere. So really, the who's who of Canadian painting were at one time members of the War Arts Program, and so for me to be included in that roster of exceptional talent is a true honor, for sure. Huge. I mean, that was like, still to this day, one of the greatest experiences I've ever had. And so there's a little Canadian Air Force base up by the North Pole. I was originally scheduled to go to Afghanistan, and because it is the War Arts Program, and the troops, Harper made a decision to withdraw troops from Afghanistan, and I got a call the next day saying, okay, we're not going to Afghanistan anymore, which was hugely disappointing to me at the time. But they offered a few different opportunities. One was to go and make paintings down in Haiti, because there was at the time, there was I think it was an earthquake down in Haiti, and there was a few Canadian forces that were flying down there. And I think I was working I was teaching at the time. I couldn't leave because it was kind of a last minute thing. And also because I spoke French, that was an opportunity to be there and be embedded with some Canadian soldiers, because obviously Canada's armed forces are bilingual, right? And instead they suggest, and I couldn't do that, but they suggested maybe going up to the North Pole, where I didn't even know there was a Canadian presence up there. But anyway, CFS Alert is the most, so here's where I went up to. The geographic North Pole, like on a calendar or a globe, is like right here. The geomagnetic or magnetic North Pole kind of moves around, and so your compass, when you're looking at a compass, I think when I was there, was somewhere around here. So I was actually further north, or like I said, potentially further south on the other side of the North Pole. So I was the very first person to ever make a painting up there. The first, doesn't matter, Russian, American, because really the only people that have been up here are scientists and soldiers, right? There's been some American submarines that have surfaced there. There was a Russian submarine that dropped a little flag on because all of the North Pole on the map is just under the ice, right? And we took snowmobiles and walked around on here. And let me see, so here's the airplane that we flew. This is the airplane we flew to get to the North Pole up there, Globemaster, which is an awesome giant like beast of an airplane. Like inside here there was like 5 like trucks that have treads on them so they can drive on the snow, which I'd never seen before. And all sorts of supplies. A bunch of people were really excited because there was the booze were being flown in. And there's, at this time it was 24-hour daylight, right? So the sun is in the middle of the sky for about 6 months, which for me was awesome because I could go outside at 4 in the morning and I could start a painting, and if it got too cold, I just pack my things up, go inside, you have these big wooden shutters you close over the windows, and it gets dark. You go to sleep, wake up, go back outside at 10 or 1 in the afternoon, and the sun is just sort of moved from there to here. So the shadows are a little bit different, but for all intents and purposes, the light is very similar, right? And it's kind of a bit of a foggy light, because one of the things, I still find this hard to believe, but I spend actually a lot of the time talking to the Environment Canada scientists up there, and they were saying something about how there's very little actual fresh snow that is made or falls from the sky. Most of the snow is just snow that is blowing around infinitely for hundreds and thousands of years. So that snow is kind of in the air and crystal, and so you have this kind of like what you see in the photograph here. That's what the sun kind of looks like to your eye most of the time. So we went way out onto the Arctic Ocean. This is what the ocean looks like out there. It looks, it's just this kind of endless. So, and this is, I think, a part of I think I'm on the island, I'm trying to remember now, way out, and this is, I'm looking back towards the island where CFS Alert was. And so I'm sort of looking back towards the landing strip there, and here's climbing on, like some of these, it's deceptive. Like this is probably like a 10-story building, right? These giant ice shards. I was corrected because there's not icebergs up there, or there probably are somewhere, but where we were, it's all ice shards. Don't ask me to tell you what the difference is, but anyway, these giant ice shards which are shot up as the ice kind of moves in and smashes, and they create all these awesome, beautiful shapes. And so you climb up, and then there's also places where you have to be careful because you could slip down in between some of these, which are just kind of covered with snow. So it was pretty dangerous to walk around on the Arctic Ocean up there. Do I have a photo? But it was this day, while we were out there on the Arctic Ocean above the North Pole, where we were wandering around. It was myself, I think 2 female soldiers, and 2 Environment Canada guy, or 1 Environment Canada guy and a female Environment Canada staff. And when we got back to because we were on there with snowmobiles, and we got off the snowmobiles and we were wandering back, and we saw there were polar bear tracks around the snowmobile. So while we had wandered away, didn't wander that far, maybe let's say 2 short city blocks away, a polar bear had been tracking us the whole time, and then had disappeared when we came back, which was alarming, because if you're essentially in the middle of nowhere and you realize there's a polar bear wandering around where you are. So we saw the tracks. Did I put the photos of the tracks up here? No. Anyway, when we got back to the base, there was quite the commotion. There was the commanding officer, the CO, and a few other guys like ran out of the building with like rifles to track the polar bear down, because again, this is what's the tragedy of global warming, is that base has been there for about 50 years, since the Cold War. It's closer to Moscow than it is to Ottawa, and there up until past like 5 years, or well, now this is 10 years ago, so like 15, 20 years ago, there was barely any life up there whatsoever, because it was way too cold for anything to live up there, except under the water, right? So like sea lions and stuff, and the occasional wolf or maybe polar bear would wander up there, but they never had to go there because it was just too cold, and they had abundance of whatever they needed further south. But since it's been warming, all that Arctic ice, which is melting, means that the polar bears have to keep going further and further north to find places where the ice is there year-round. Otherwise, they starve and they drown. But since there's this human base there, if the polar bears get comfortable being around people, then the chances of them attacking someone and coming onto the campus of the base, which itself is pretty small. It's like the size of, again, about a city block, like a elementary school, right? There's, I think, 40 or so people that are up there. It's the most isolated place on Earth. And here's this sign that all of these. Let me see if we could find some. So here's. Like, here's what this base looks like in the summer. You can see that's what summer is up there. Oh, here's this sign. So this sign has all of these, like, Newfoundland, 3,000 or 10,000 kilometers away. Calgary, 50,000 kilometers. I don't know how distance is, but so it's really, every time Canadian soldiers come up there, they nail a new sign up there to show where they are. So I made a painting there, while there was a couple of pretty tough guys sitting in a truck, like soldiers sitting there, watching me paint. They were just like, oh my goodness, why on earth have we been sent up here to watch this idiot make a painting? So it's pretty, talk about stress. Like, it's stressful making a painting live on YouTube. It's a whole other thing to be standing outside in the freezing cold while there's a couple soldiers sitting in a warm truck, just sitting there watching you, waiting for you to finish, and it better be a good painting, otherwise they're going to be kind of, it's a small base, and if word starts getting around that you're a bad artist and it's a waste of time, then anyway, I did a good enough job that people are like kind of excited. There was a small, like, wood shop there they use for, and the guy who ran the wood shop built me some crates for all the paintings that I made. And lastly, what else do I want to show here before I move on? There was a couple of accidents up there in which a couple of those large airplanes crashed and soldiers died and pilots died. So there's this kind of monument to those soldiers up there, and they're buried up there. So this is a small painting. This one's maybe that big. Again, a painting I made in 20 minutes in the freezing cold. Anyway, anything else I want to talk about? Oh, maybe I'll save my grizzly bear story for another time. But being tracked by a polar bear at the North Pole is something that I'm glad I lived to tell about. I don't know what happened to that polar bear. Sadly, I think that polar bear was shot. Because, yeah, and there's not that many polar bears around, so, and the more and more polar bears that go further north, the more they're going to be endangered of a similar kind of fate. I remember, just to kind of, as I get close to wrap up, I remember, because I spent a few days sketching on the Arctic Ocean like this, and I just had this, like, distinct feeling that in, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, this place that I'm standing, which is, there's 50 people here, a landing strip, and, that's really it. That in 100 years, there's going to be giant tankers pulling into a port, just like at the port of Los Angeles, or the port of Vancouver, or Tokyo, Beijing, anywhere in Holland, or London, or wherever, that there would be these, and there would be a giant city of tens of thousands, millions of people living there, because as the snow melts, bigger ships can come up there. Right now, the only way to get food and water and supplies for those soldiers is to fly in. But very soon, and it seems like it's accelerating every year, they're going to be able to send a boat up there and dock and unload supplies that way. There is already a deep, like there is, they specifically built that base there, like maybe they had some great foresight back in the 1940s when they built it, but they potentially could pull a boat into this small little bay harbor there. Anyway, I just was like, man, I might be one of the last persons who gets to see and experience this whole place in its quote-unquote like natural state, before it becomes, you know, a giant bustling town. People talking about being zoomed out here in the chat. Deborah says, if we go Zoom, I will have to get out of my PJs and get dressed properly. Deborah says, if you go on Zoom, you should charge. Yeah, I mean, that's, honestly, that's kind of one of the things, is I feel like if I do that, then I'd have to charge, and then it makes me feel uncomfortable having to, some people that wouldn't be able to attend, and so there's, whereas I like being able to provide this for people free, and if people want to donate, they are free to do so. Anyway, speaking of which, if you are interested in donating to my channel to help support this and future classes, there is a link to PayPal down below. Donations, large and small, are appreciated, and currently, there's no ads or anything on my YouTube channel, so the only funding I get that supports the work that I'm doing is through donations. So anything people are interested in giving is greatly appreciated. Okay, have I told all my stories? In just a few days, next Tuesday, we are going to make a landscape painting by another Sikh artist, Trilok Singh Chetakar. And he is probably, I would bet that unless you're a Sikh person or from the Punjab community, you probably, most 99.9% of people in North America have never heard of him. But a fantastic artist, highly respected back in India. So we're going to make a landscape painting of his. Let me just take a quick little... then the week after, we are going to do a Star Wars themed painting, because it's May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. That's a tricky thing to say, May the 4th be with you. So we're going to do a Star Wars themed painting. We're going to look at one of the artists whose artwork, he was one of the production artists who made all the paintings that inspired the look of Star Wars. So I'm super excited. Ralph McQuarrie is his name. And then I think the next day that following weekend is National Comic Book Day. And so one of the suggestions was to do an Alex Ross painting. So we're going to do an Alex Ross painting, I think. Maybe I shouldn't speak too soon, because there is another... Yeah, but... I know that was a suggestion that a few people have asked for. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff coming up. For Mother's Day, I've got a fun painting we're going to do for Mother's Day. One of the most famous paintings of a mother in existence. I'll let you think about what that might be. So, lots of cool things coming down the pipeline. I'm glad that you guys were able to paint with me today. I'm so excited to continue our journey together. So, with all of that being said, I think, folks, I am going to call it a day. And, yeah, I can't wait to see the painting you made of the polar bear today. The more I look at it, the more I want to do to it, but I'm just going to walk away. So thank you, everybody. We'll see you guys very, very soon. Enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll see you.